Hey everyone, welcome back to Brainstorm. This is Python for NCEA. Now in this video, we're going to take a look at taking input from the user. So up until now, we've been setting our own values into variables. So for example, if I set up the variable item and I set it equal to the string water bottle, I've set the item to be a water bottle, right? What if I wanted the user to specify what the item was, right? So what if we want to make our variables actually variable? So it depends on what the user does. This is where the input function comes in. So taking user input is actually quite simple. All that we do is we use the input function. So we type in input, we use opening and closing brackets, and then inside our opening and closing brackets, we want to put 2 quotation marks. Now, inside our quotation marks, we want to put what we want to ask the user. So for example, if we want to prompt the user to enter their name, we should say, what is your name? And let's put a question mark. So if I save this and click F5, we see what is your name pops up in the idle shell. And you can see that our cursor here is flashing, which indicates we can write something. So if I write my name as John, so I type in John and click enter, well then our program ends because we haven't done anything else. So you'll notice that in the idle shell, we have a question mark and then there's like no space in between here. So usually when we write user input, we want to put a space at the end to indicate, well, we want some free space for the user to write. So if I type in John now, it's the same thing. It's just that this prompting message just has this extra space here. Now, the user has inputted John and the program is ended. But what if we want to save what they write? So the way that we do that is we just want to store whatever the input is into a variable. So let's make a variable called first name, and let's set that equal to the input. And then afterwards, we want to print the variable first name. So if I save that and run it, what is your name? I enter John, and now you can see it prints out the variable first name, which we've stored as John. All right, let's do a second example where we ask the user for their birth month. So, and then we want to display what the birth month was on the screen. So we're going to store that in a variable called birth month. So birth month is equal to, and we want to use the input function to take input from the user. So we write input, opening and closing brackets, and then we want to ask them, what is your birth month? With a question mark, and let's put a space there just to format it a bit more nicely. So whatever they put in as their birth month, it's going to store in the variable birth month. Now let's display that to the idle shell. So what we want to do is we want to print your birth month is, and I'm going to use the printing technique where we use curly braces, and I'm going to put the birth month in to replace the curly braces, right? So you can watch the video on printing techniques if that's a bit unfamiliar to you. So if I save that and click F5, the idle shell prompts us, what is your name? So we're going to put in John. So that is just from this input here. So now if we want to look at what we do for these parts here, the question asks, what is your birth month now? Let's say my birth month is March. Click enter. Then the program now says your birth month is March. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at taking input where we want the input from the user to be a number. For example, what if we wanted to know the user's age? So let's create a variable called age, and let's prompt the user to enter their age. So enter your age. So let's print the age after as well. So when we click F5, it prompts us to enter your age. So let's say my age is 45. Then it prints 45 to the screen. Now my question to you is it printing a string or an integer? Well, the answer to that is that it's actually printing a string. So any input that we take from the user is always a string. So just to verify that, I can print the type of variable that age is, and it should give me that it is a string. So as you can see, it's of the string class. But we know that age is always a number. Hence, if we want to change this the input to be an integer, what we do is we use a function, or we wrap the input around with the integer tags, right? So we go integer, opening and closing brackets, and then inside we put the input. So all of this goes inside the integer brackets. So what this is saying is, whatever the input is, let's change the class type to an integer, or whatever the input is, whatever string this is, let's make it an integer. So now, if we do the same thing, it should give us that it is of the integer class. So if I click F5, we enter the age to be 45. It prints 45, but now you can see that it is indeed an integer. Now, we need to be careful when we use this integer input, because if the user puts a string in, let's say they write 45 like this, it's going to give me an error, because as you remember, we cannot convert a string of text into an integer. So if I enter this, say it's an invalid literal for integer, because converting this to a number does not make sense. Alright, so let's take a look at our application questions. So question 1, we want to prompt the user to enter the length of the hypotenuse of a triangle. Store this in a variable called hypotenuse. Next, we want to prompt the user to enter the length of another side of a triangle. Store this in a variable called side A. We then want to use the Pythagorean theorem to calculate the size of side B. And we want to print this value rounded to 2 decimal places. And you might find the following formula useful, which is the rearrangement of the Pythagorean theorem, which is b squared is equal to c squared minus a squared. And recall that c squared is the hypotenuse. So pause the video, have a go, and then I'll go over the solution. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do is prompt the user to enter the length of the hypotenuse. So now, if you think about it, should the hypotenuse be, or the length of the hypotenuse be, an integer or a string? Well, in fact, we want it to be neither. We want it to be a float, right? So the user can enter any real number that's non-negative, right? Or greater than 0. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to do, we want to store it in a variable called hypotenuse. So hypotenuse is equal to the float version of the input into the length of the hypotenuse of a triangle. So if we save this and run it, enter the length of the hypotenuse of a triangle. So let's put 4.2, and then the program ends because we haven't done anything else. What do we want to do next? We want to prompt the user to enter the length of a different side. We want to call this side side A, and we're going to store another float value, which takes the input into a different side of the triangle. So if I run this now, I would get the program would ask me to enter the hypotenuse and then a different side. We're then going to apply the Pythagorean theorem. So we want to calculate the value of side B. So side B is equal to the value of c squared minus a squared. And then if we rearrange this, it would be the square root of that. So essentially, we're going to say side B squared is equal to the value of the hypotenuse squared. So hypotenuse to the power of 2 subtracted from the value of side A to the power of 2. And then we need to square root all of this. So in order to use the square root function, we should use the import math module. So let's go to the top of our function, or our program, sorry, and let's import math. So now we can use math.square root. So let's write side B again. So side B is equal to math.square root of all of the stuff in here. So we've already saved this as the variable side B. So we're just going to go math.square root side B. So this will take the square root of whatever's going on in here. Now, we want to print this value rounded to 2dp. So essentially, we're going to round whatever the value of side B is to 2 decimal places. So we're going to use the round function. So we're going to write round, opening and closing brackets. We're going to put in what we want to round, which is this the square root of side B. Or sorry, it would be the square root of side B squared. And then we want to round it to do 2 decimal points. So we put a 2 there. Sweet. So if we print this now, or print the value of side B, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to prompt us to enter the length. So using the example input, let's put the hypotenuse as 10 centimeters. The value of side A is 6 centimeters. And as you can see, we get an 8 centimeter output, which seems to be the correct value. So we want to print this suggested output here. So we're just going to format it the same way. So the remaining side has a length of, we're going to put curly braces because that's what we want to replace. Then we're going to use dot format, opening and closing brackets, and we're going to put in the value of side B. So if we save that and click F5, 10 centimeters is the hypotenuse, 6 centimeters is the value of side A. So the remaining side has a length of 8 centimeters. So I guess this is a program that you could use in year 10 or even year 11 math. Alright, let's move on to question 2. Prompt the user to enter 3 integers separated by whitespace. Store each individual number in variables number 1, number 2, and number 3. The program should print out the numbers in descending order, and we should see the suggested output for formatting and the use of functions min and max that could be helpful. So the output is the largest number separated by an arrow, the middle number separated by an arrow, and then the smallest number. Now, we also don't want to use any if statements or anything like that. Okay, so anything we haven't learned yet, don't use it. So pause the video, have a go, and then I'll go over the solution. Okay, so prompt the user to enter 3 integers separated by whitespace. So as a result, we don't want to take the input from the user as an integer because we're going to take a string of 3 integers. Okay, or a string of 3 numbers, and then we're going to have to manually separate them. So the way that we're going to do that is by using some of the techniques we saw in last week's video on string manipulation. So first, let's prompt the user to enter 3 integers. So we're going to store it in a variable called 3 integers. And we're going to take user input, and we're going to say enter 3 numbers separated by whitespace. And I've spelled separated wrong. And then afterwards, I'm just going to print 3 integers just to verify that we've taken the input correctly. So if I run that, enter 3 numbers separated by whitespace. So we're going to take 3, 5, and 2, for example, and it prints 3, 5, and 2 just fine. Now remember, this is a string. This is not an integer, okay? So if we want to separate these numbers out, what we would have to do is we'd have to find the location of the first space. So let's create a variable called first index. We're going to save that equal to 3 integers. We're going to use the dot find method to find the index of that white space. So dot find, and inside the dot find we put quotation marks and then the value that we want to find, which is the space or the blank space. So if you remember how we do our indexing, the first white space is at index 1 because we go 0, 1. So the first index should be at index 1. If I print the first index, so I just take random numbers, we take random numbers 1, 1, 1 for example, then you can see that the first index of the white space is at index 1. So the next thing that we want to do is, well, I guess we always know, well, now that we know that where the location of the first white space is, we can segregate out the first number. So for 3 integers, we're going to take the first slice of the string. So we're going to call first number, and that's equal to 3 integers. And we're going to take a slice of 3 integers. So what's the start value? Well, we're just going to start from the very start. So no start value or starting from index 0. We don't actually have to specify that if we're starting from the very start. And where do we want to stop? Well, we want to stop at the first index. And we don't want to include that white space. So we're just going to stop at the first index. And this should separate out my first number. So for example, if I print the first number now, save that and run it. If I put 3 different numbers in, let's say 5, 6, and 7, you can see that it outputs 5. But remember, 5 is still a string, right? So if we want to make this an integer, we need to put this into the int function, right? So now this will convert that the first number into an actual integer. So it will still output the same thing. Now, the reason that what you might be thinking, well, this is just one number here, so couldn't we just use index 0? There's nothing stopping me from writing a number which is more than 1 digit. Let's choose the numbers 5555, 22, and 1. Well, because we specified that we want to take the first integer up until we find that first white space, you can see that it actually gives me the full number just fine. Okay, next thing that we want to do is we want to find the value of the middle number, or this, not necessarily the middle number, but the second number, right? So we already know the location of this white space here. So what are we going to do? Well, essentially what we want to do is we need to find the location of this white space. And we need to find the location of this white space. And as a result, then we can segregate out the number here. Another way that we can do it is we can slice all this stuff off so that we're left with here and here, and then we can just apply the find method again. We're going to go by using the first method I talked about just to broaden our understanding of Python a little bit more. So we're going to so we've already got the location of this index here. Let's find the index of the next white space. So let's call it second index, and let's set it equal to 3 integers dot rfind, and we want to find the location of the white space from the right hand side. So what rfind does is it does the same thing as find. So it finds the index of a given character, but we're doing it from the right hand side, so it moves this way instead of forward. So what do we want to do? So this is going to find the index of this white space here, which is 3. And then now we've got the index of white space here, so 1 and 3. So we can now separate out our second number. So second number is equal to 3 integers dot 3 integers, and we want to take a slice of 3 integers. So we want to start at the value of this white space plus 1, because remember this is inclusive, right? So whatever the value of first index is, we want to go start at something 1 past it. So we want to start here, and then we want to go up until, but not including the second white space. So we're just going to put up until second index, and we're going to step by 1 by default, so we don't need to specify anything there. So remember that this will still give us a string because we're using string slicing. So we're going to convert all of that into an integer. If I print the first number and I print the second number, click F5, enter 3 numbers separated by white space, 1, 2, and 3, we get 1 and 2. Now let's also check it with numbers with more than 1 digit. So let's try 33, 44, and 55. And as you can see, it gets 33 and 44 just fine. So now we want to find the location of the last number here. We've already got the index of this white space here, so it should be relatively straightforward. Our third number is equal to 3 integers, which is our string, if you remember. So we want to take a slice of that. And the slice is going to be from the second index plus 1. So starting here up until the end. So second index is where we start, added with 1, all the way until the end of the string. If I print the third number now, let's write 44, 55, and 66. It prints out all my numbers in separate variables. So that's really good. Now we can go ahead and do what the question actually wants us to do, which is print out the numbers in descending order. So we've got a hint here, the use of functions min and max may be helpful. Well, you might be thinking, well, how is this going to be helpful? Essentially what I can do, I can find the smallest element and I can find the largest element. And then how do we get the middle element without using any conditional statements or if statements? Essentially, we're going to sum up all the numbers, subtract the smallest number, subtract the largest number, and what's left over is that middle number. So that's a pretty cool mathematical way to do it. So we've got the first, second, and third number. So let's remove these print statements for now. So let's find the smallest value. So smallest, we're going to create a variable called smallest, and that's equal to the minimum of all three numbers. So what we put in the minimum function is the numbers that we want to find the minimum value for. So that's going to be first number, second number, and third number. Now, for example, in this, we know as humans that this is the smallest number, but a computer doesn't know that. So we're going to go first, second, and third, and then this is going to output the smallest number. Now let's find the largest number. So we're going to do pretty much the same thing, but instead we want to find the maximum. So we're going to use the max function. We take the parameters first number, second number, and third number. And this is going to give me the smallest and largest values. So let me print smallest and largest. And let's see what happens. So enter three numbers separated by white space. Let's do 1, 8, and 9. Alright, and as you can see, we've got an error here, so I've made a mistake somewhere. So what is the mistake that I've made? Hopefully you can see is that I've forgotten to convert this to an integer. So remember that our numbers have to be integers. The way that I was able to quickly figure that out is you can see that this error code here says that it's not supported between instances of strings and integers, so that means one of my numbers had to be a string, which you can quickly identify as this one here. So let's convert it to an integer. If I save it and run it again, 1, 8, and 9, now we get the smallest number followed by the largest number. Awesome. So now that we've got the smallest and largest number, we just want to work out the middle number. So the way that we do that is we're going to add all three numbers up. So the first number, the second number, and the third number. We're going to subtract the smallest number, and we're going to subtract the largest number, and that's going to leave me with the middle number. And I hope that if that doesn't make sense to you, you might want to get out some pen and paper and prove that to yourself. So we've got the smallest, largest, and middle numbers, and now we just want to put it into the suggested output format. So we're going to print, and in our print statement, we're going to get the largest value. We're going to draw an arrow, then we're going to get the middle value, we're going to draw an arrow, and then we're going to get the smallest value. We're then going to use dot format, and we're going to put the largest, the middle number, and then the smallest number. So wherever we see curly brackets, it's going to be replaced with the largest, the middle, and then the smallest. Save that, and let's click F5, enter three numbers separated by white space. Let's do 1, 2, and 3, and if all went well, we should see the output being 3, arrow 2, arrow 1. And as you can see, we get 3, arrow 2, arrow 1. Let's use the example input now. So let's click F5 to run it again. Number 1 is going to be 17, number 2 is going to be 3, and number 2 is going to be 3, and number 3 is going to be 15. And then it rearranges itself in descending order, so 17, 15, and then 3. So let's do one more example with some larger numbers. Let's do 4,921. Let's do the number 444, and let's do the number 1. And this was already in descending order, so it's just printed it out like so. Now, you might be wondering, what happens if the user enters something that we don't want, such as a letter, TT, S, A, and then 33. Well, we're going to get errors here because essentially we haven't done any error handling. So we're going to look at error handling a little bit further down the line. But until then, we're going to just assume that the user always enters correct input. Awesome, guys. That's it for this video. Thanks for checking out our video on user input, and stick around for the next video. Cheers.